Very welcome along to Thursday morning's OTB AM. It's a very special OTB AM this morning because we have a studio guest all the way from La Rochelle, the Hollywood Lights of La Rochelle. Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Ger, Owen, great to be here. Feels strange, back. First time in 2 years, I think, back to Ireland.
Right.
So, yeah.
Have we changed as a people? Are we more welcome, more open, or are we still the shower of bollocks?
I haven't met anyone. I got in really late. I got up early, didn't cross anyone walking across the green.
Okay,
so,
very good.
Excited to be here now for this little segment and get a day's work done, and then back to my real job tonight.
And the real job at the moment, is this a busy time of the year focused just on the upcoming games, or are you already plotting and planning for next year? And
so what's actually happening at the minute is they're kind of making up time during the Six Nations for the games that had COVID issues earlier in the season. So for example, this weekend, and you have to keep the order of the schedules, do you get me? So
you have to play the games in sequence as they were.
Correct, that's the right English for that. So it's Montpellier, Toulon this weekend, then it's Toulon, La Rochelle the following weekend, and on Sunday night it is Clermont, Bordeaux, and there's another game the following, one more game to make it up, so everyone then has played, I think, 20 games, 6 games to go, and it's probably 9 teams within 7 points. So it's carnage.
I mean, it is carnage, but it's also exciting, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. because there's different ways of going about it too, because with the history of the bouclier and trying to be competitive and to win it, it's nearly takes off once you get to the phase finale, as they say, the barrage. You probably need a lot of juice in the tank at that stage, but you got to make sure you're in the top 6. Last year was probably different because I put a big emphasis probably on, finishing first or second, which we did, which was brilliant because you go straight to semi-final, which means you're 80 from a final. But we were really good in the semi-final, and then within 10 minutes of the final, you knew against Toulouse that they mentally, physically had an advantage on us. I was just reading, they've 10 in the French squad this weekend, so similar to Leinster, I suppose, in how they supply the bulk of the team to the French team. But you're obviously constantly plotting in your head how you can go about putting this so-called masterpiece in place.
Yeah, and so that's always there for the short term, but I presume a lot of agents are bringing you and saying, my guy's free at the end of the year, he wants to come. Is that always happening? Does that happen 12 months a year, or is there a period of the year where that ramps up?
It's an interesting question. Usually, with a little bit of experience now, getting a bit wiser, that's not a call you want,
right?
Because you have to have a good system, a good plan, a really, I suppose, the strengths, the weaknesses, SWOT analysis nearly when it comes to your recruitment, and it's something that's hugely, hugely important. You can keep telling yourself you're a great coach, but I think, as we all know, there's certain cattle that are better than other cattle in the field.
Yeah.
And I think a good example of that would be Will Skelton. There's very few, I suppose, players, athletes of that, not capabilities, but of that measurements available in the market. So, like, it just helps when you kind of, how do you convince him that it's the right thing to leave Saracens to come to play? And I think that was a big, I suppose, plus for me, in the fact that he wanted something different. He wanted to try something else, but the coaching has to be good. But once you get that, you have. We've done good recruitment for next season. That's next season, George. It doesn't count. People are there. Well, we'll have a good plan, but 4 months in sport is so long, so it's only getting exciting now. My field season feels that it hasn't even started.
But if you don't do the recruitment well now, then next season could be not a write-off, but you're behind the 8 ball straight away. And I'm always struck by the fact that these are different jobs, the recruitment job and the coaching job. Like in football, traditionally the soccer manager would have bought his players for his style of play, but now clubs realise that actually it's a very difficult thing to know all the best talent in all of the leagues around Europe. And so, do you get help with that? Is there somebody else that you can lean on? Is there Is there?
Yeah, I think it's a really fast changing space. It's one of the meetings I'm going to have today. There's a few people in Dublin that are very, very good at this in terms of, I suppose, analysing the data and making sense of the data from schools players from South Africa, Australia, England, France, all around the world, to first, second, third division players all over the world, and understanding who's performing and having actually a system that a coach can kind of respect, understand, and put that into the kind of the big pot to give you the data to say, yeah, this guy will go well here, or this guy under the high ball, for example, is very, very strong. This guy on his right shoulder isn't capable of making tackles one-on-one. All stuff like that, that when you're playing week to week, you get churned out by next game. But then in the background, there's some really smart brains that are providing information like that, and something now that I think as a player I was probably reluctant to it. I was big in the GPS and the competition within the players and in the team, but I think as in the management in the background, you have to be aware of this. But I think I remember years back, maybe was it Wales in Six Nations games, were changing players because of drop off in intensity or in meters per second later in the game, which I don't think that's probably the best way of doing it either, in the fact that you kind of have to understand the flow of a game, and sometimes there's way more action on the right hand side than there is on the left hand side if your plan is to hit midfield and either sweep or to play the same way. So you've one back row maybe that's not involved at all, but he essentially is doing a lot of benefit for the team by holding his width, that people are attracted to him. But the data, it's a fascinating space. But I think it's the same, I suppose, as putting in robots, is it, into factories and stuff. You need that human element.
Yeah, totally. And is rugby kind of catching up on other sports a little bit with that stuff? Like, is there a world where in 5 years' time every individual club has somebody whose job it is to make sure that they have the best data for the players I'm talking about? So at the moment, if you're a football manager in the League of Ireland, you can sign up to Y Scout and you get information on every single footballer who's registered, and you can track kids all around the world in almost all their games and give analysis on the quality of their performance. It doesn't seem like we're at that point yet with rugby.
I'd say we're very close to it. I think that will be happening, I'd say, within the next 12 months. I think there's a guy, Derek McNamara, I think his name is, and incredibly interesting. And I think he was involved with an American company, but I think he's gone back on his own now, so he can keep more control of it.
Right.
And I think it's some of his ideas or some of his potential suggestions, and just make you stop and go, okay, there is something here definitely, because as you say, you like where you could get an Espoir, for example, to come in to a French club under the age of 20. He just has to play 3 years and then he becomes GIF. Like, people don't understand that. Even a lot of young Irish players here, if they can get that license or that qualification for 3 years, they're made.
Do you have it for life? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you can go and come back and come back.
Exactly. That's the strength of the French game.
Okay, right.
Well, exactly.
So if you're a good 19-year-old who hasn't quite made the first team here, you could go to France and play 3 years, or do you need to be 17 to go?
No, 18, I think.
Okay.
See, they all call it before 2000. None of that doesn't register in my brain when they talk about 2000, 2001. He's 2003. You're like, what age is that? But also, more interestingly, and it's something that hasn't been probably talked about enough, if you're a Southern Hemisphere front row, for example, and you did 3 years from 18 to 22 in an academy in France, and then you want to go and chase the All Black dream,
you can do that, but come back at the end and
you would have your GIF qualification, nice, which all of a sudden gives you a really, really good living.
Yeah.
And then you have the best of both worlds, maybe.
That's interesting, because we had Ross Hamilton on the show last week talking about the speed of the Ireland breakdown, and it's that level of data analysis where we know speed of the breakdown is very important, but he had it to like the number of seconds, and it was 2.2 for Ireland, and we were second, and he was like, this had happened now, so consistency over a long period of time, it is something that they've clearly focused on in the Ireland camp, and it's that bit that the data becomes transferable to us and as lay people when we're watching the game. So it actually improves and enhances the quality of spectating.
Correct, but also I think that's a perfect example of understanding probably the data and the coaching mixed in one. So if it's something that I'm absorbing as well, because they're of the same school, Donncha Ryan, Paul O'Connell, so they would be huge fans, students of that area of the game, and understanding how you can speed it up and what slows it down. So they actually, getting the speed of the ruck ball, they actually want the players to get to the ruck before it's even happened, so that it doesn't become a ruck. And you're like, oh, well, how actually does that happen? But if I had a video here, I'd be able to explain it to you, and it's really, really powerful how it works. And I think it's an area of the game where, on the flip side of that, we have someone in our staff that would be very much intent on messing up the opposition's ruck ball. So
they're all part of the same thing, though, aren't they? It's like if we slow theirs down to 3.5 seconds, then all of a sudden our defence is fully set and they're not going to be able to get it.
Yeah, and in rugby, it's the first two phases or first two collisions that are very important. So if you don't stop Robbie Henshaw or Bundy Aki, and then you've, James Ryan or Josh van der Fleer on a good line coming around the corner on phase two, all of a sudden they're on the front foot. The opposition are retreating. It just makes it very, very easy. But for example, if you get a good shot on the gain line in first phase, and you have an inside threat on the ball and an outside threat potentially going to slow that down or look for penalty, because diving off the feet will be a penalty. So there's so many games within the game around the ruck at the minute. But yeah, I think it's a hot topic, but the ruck has always been very, very important for the last 20 years. There's probably a lot more detail available now in terms of data.
Yeah. He was speculating that what Ireland had done was focused on this, obviously, and it sounds like that's true, and then have they're playing a relatively high risk game where they're not committing huge numbers. So the idea is to get the ruck in, get out of it fast, keep the ball moving, and don't commit a huge amount. So if you do get turned over, the 3 or 4 times in the game that you get turned over, you're willing to take that punch each time, on the basis that the speed of your ruck is so impressive over the 70 or 80 or 90 rucks that there are, that on balance it's much better to be.
Yeah. And I think that was Joe Schmidt's greatest strength, I think, in the fact that that's how he coached. But what we're seeing now is probably then the evolution of that, and the fact that I think Joe was so, I suppose, intent on making a ruck, but in France they don't like going to ground, or they don't like ruck and jeu debout, they try and keep the ball alive and play it out of the tackle. So you can see all the Toulouse players, they will probably, their last option will be to fall, while in Ireland for a time, when we were so ruck focused, the easiest thing was to fall, to create a ruck, knowing that your two nearest supporters would be there, otherwise it wouldn't be the ball carrier's fault. Now I think we've had an understanding that the ball carrier is hugely important, that he has to fight to try and win his one-on-one in front of him, and then you either play the ball out of the tackle, or if you need to ruck, we can ruck, but there's probably that obsession with the ruck is gone. But for so many years it was so good for Ireland, but then it just became stale, and the fact that the opposition, I think, became aware that there isn't going to be this kind of capacity to play instinctively, and that became probably the downfall. But I think from a young coach, you have to admire and the success Joe had in that regard. Now it's coached by Paul, who is a massive fan of Joe Schmidt, but what's coming in then is that, as you correctly said, there's more risk taking, there's more capacity to play the moment in front of you, to, as you say, to see what picture the opposition are giving you, and there's not this probably negative arms up in the air approach if there's an error. So it's kind of, we dig in for each other.
Yeah.
And did that change happen as quickly as it seemed to us? Like, inside the game, did you see that alteration in how the game should be played coming all along? Because to us it was like, end of 2018, this is working, start of 2019, this is not working.
Yeah, I think that's what happens at top level sport. When it stops, you fall off a cliff. You look at, I suppose, you mean going to the World Cup and the performances at the World Cup, it was kind of, it looked that it just wasn't happening on. And when you're living that and you're in that, it reminds me of probably the 2007 World Cup. It's horrendous. You feel you so want to change, and you do everything to change, and you work so hard during the week to change it, but you're nearly powerless to do anything about it, because you're eaten up alive inside by not being able to do it.
I just want to tell everybody what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We've obviously got Ronan O'Gara with us in the studio for a little while longer. Newspapers coming up at 8:05. Martin Lipton at 8:20. Sports news at 8:40. The very latest from the Hurling Pod with Will at 8:50. And Colin Boyle's going to join us at 9:10 to talk to us about what's happening this weekend. And Philly McMahon is also going to talk to us around about 9:30 this morning. Can I ask you about Sexton and the new deal? And you know, Brian just was sitting where you were sitting during the week, and he was making the point that now modern athletes are going on to their 40s, and the Tom Brady example is the one I think that Stuart Lancaster had made to Sexton after the last World Cup, to kind of, you know, say this isn't the end. This, you know, you can keep going, and he's obviously still going. He's still very effective. It sounds like a lot of Irish rugby fans are penciling him in now. That's our out half problem for the World Cup solved.
Yeah, it would be. And it was a most logical step during the week because of the way he's playing. So I think there's probably the separation between, that's what happened during the week was a contractual issue, in the fact that if Johnny you know what I mean, has the appetite and wants to play to the next World Cup, that path is very clear for him to go chase that. I think in reality it isn't straightforward in the fact when you get to his age, it becomes difficult. Not to say it can't be done, but I think he's in a position with his performances this season where the team needs him, and as long as that is the case, then he will drive on. What is very different though is NFL to rugby union. Rugby union is a phase game where you have to play close to the gain line and you don't have protection. What also happens is that when you go to big competitions, you have probably, you know what I mean, 5 or 6 games within a 6-week period, where it's very difficult probably to play week in, week out at that age, because I think what people sometimes miss is the fact that when you're such a competitor and your team are trying to win a qualifying semi-final of big competitions, training is hugely important. So people miss the point that you have to train hard to get the best out of you and the team, and that's where I suppose the growth in the team comes between now and the next World Cup. And as you saw, he was excellent against Wales, but Monday or Tuesday after that, after a big game on the Saturday, went hard and probably a tweak in his hamstring. That happens at that age, and that's something that I think that the public have to expect from, I suppose, if you were in the Irish management team, it would be interesting to see how they're going to manage the number 2 and number 3, because I think it would be probably an overestimation if you're counting on him for every game. That for me at that age, it's not possible. I think he's an incredible competitor and a massive willingness to get Ireland to a semi-final, which is always going to be in a player's thing. But like Andy Farr will have to have that plan where at the minute the number 2 is underplayed, probably prepared and undercooked for Johnny to miss a period of 3 or 4 games. What I think you're looking for there is that you're looking to upskill Joey with game time. Is it Harry Byrne after that with game time?
We don't know.
Jack Carty,
yeah.
You know, but it's...
And there's not many games to find out.
And the games are big games. You look at the calendar ahead, it's England, Scotland, New Zealand, New Zealand, New Zealand, I think maybe America, is it South Africa, Australia. Brilliant games. So it's...
What would you do?
Wouldn't you love to have that choice? But there's a huge, obviously, skill in keeping Johnny simmering and on the ball. But like the reality is for me that you have to get as much minutes into whoever you're because if Johnny starts every game, the reality is I think if he plays 50 or 60, it's fantastic. Or does he finish the last 30?
Which would you prefer? Because it sounds like we're actually asking him too much to be our starting out half for a tournament like the World Cup. Like the point you made about the injuries. Jamie Vardy was out for 2 months with a hamstring injury, comes back, injures his knee, he's gone for another month. And Vardy's 18 months younger than Sexton is. Like players at that age get injuries all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because if they don't push hard in training, they won't get to because they're fighting for their time at that stage, and they need to train well to give them that confidence to know I can do this. And age is just a number, but it's not just a number at times because your body.
So do we transition quickly in the meantime? Let's park the World Cup, right, and see whoever is the best out half at the World Cup and whoever is fit at the time, you pick them for those games. But should we actually be getting to the situation where we're starting Carberry and Sexton's on the bench for games sooner rather than later? Like certainly in the summer, but maybe before that.
Yeah, but I think there's been such a huge focus on this Six Nations that it seems to me that they're going to probably go strongest team against England, which includes Sexton. I would say there'd be potential to change that against Scotland, is how I read it as a complete outsider. That would be my thinking on it. Then I think the summer tour gives you different gives you different options but as you say, it's you need to be kind of understanding who the number 2 is too, because it's only, I know only, but it's only in the fact that you're trying to grow the younger guys' games, and that 15 months is very important to them. While that will seem short, but for someone like Johnny, 18 or 15 months is a long time, because it's at that age it's not a difficult, but it's a challenging road to put yourself in the best physical position.
You said there that there's obviously not enough time to find out how good your number 2 is, or to road test your number 2 in test rugby. Is that actually why Joey Carberry disappointed a few people with his performance the last day? Because he hasn't been given that opportunity, and that is the exact sort of growing pain that is going to need to be experienced in order to get closer to Johnny Sexton? Yeah,
because he's played very little rugby too over the last 2 years from an injury point of view. He's anything that's kind of, if you look at his list of injuries, it was quite a lengthy list. So whether he's playing, with the, I suppose, fractured nation of the season too, with the URC competition, he's not. In that position, he needs to be playing 80 minutes 10 times in a row. But I'd say if you look at his minutes, it's way off that. And I'm only stabbing here now, and I'm not. That may not be accurate, but I think, so, you know what I mean. Especially as an out half, you just get better and better and better by owning that position and getting comfortable in that jersey. But like that, obviously, dictates, but the union run the provinces, and the fact that it could be okay, well, you need Joey playing at 10 every game he's available, because that'll make the national team in a better position.
And if they're thinking right now that Sexton is going to be their number 1 out half at the World Cup, does it not then make sense to give him this summer off, because is he going to be able to play all throughout this summer, all throughout this autumn, and for Leinster, and then of course pre-season or pre-World Cup test matches next summer? Like, there's going to have to be some bit of give, you'd suspect, for a player of his age at that point. So you pull Sexton out of one of those windows, surely, do you? And you can't pull him out of the Six Nations next year.
No, you can't, exactly. But that's managing your players and knowing what buttons to push and how do you get the best out of them. And it's probably not a one-way conversation. I think you have to feed back too from how the athlete is feeling and how does he view things. I think, as you said, though, it's the management who decide this and probably make the formula for being successful at a World Cup. If you were the player, and I remember back, and you're being told I'm not throwing to New Zealand when there's a possibility of making history, it's a very, very difficult decision to swallow on. But the players don't decide. You know, I mean, that's the big difference. That when you go to the other side, you understand that the player's mentality is kind of a one lens view, while if from a staff's point of view, you have everything kind of discussed and probably chatted through. Where
does a player change your mind ever after you think you've made your mind up?
No, I don't. For me, that would be that you are. You weren't probably decisive in your own thoughts before you had the meeting. I think what a player can do is most definitely make you aware of his point of view and potentially have a new point of view that you may not have thought about. But, I mean, for example, I think when it's, lately you've kind of, for me, learning, you fitness test a player before a game and, yeah, I'm fine, coach, I'm perfect. So I did too. And one guy blew up after 1 minute 20, and the other guy was past it, was okay, and looked me in the eye and said fine. But then 5 hours later, he went on the pitch and he was dead.
Right.
So like that for me was a good learning. The fact that he won the fitness test, but he failed the game. What did I need him for the game?
Yeah.
But it's hard at times but that's where you need to be not popular to kind of go, well, no, sorry, what's best for the team today is you're out, get yourself ready for Monday and you'll have another go.
One last thing that I wanted to kind of just tease out, the evolution of the style of play we've talked a little bit about. How do we make sure that it continues to get better between now and the World Cup and that we're not peaking now, basically? The PTSD and the trauma of the last World Cup hangs heavy over Irish rugby. Like,
yeah,
we are.
It's all forgotten about now, and the fact that we're on probably a spurt in the curve.
Yeah, a year out, like we were the last time.
Yeah, even more, even 18 months out.
Mm.
Yeah, and that would be.
How do you keep the spurt going, I suppose, is the question.
I think you just you stay in the moment, and I think you make short term kind of growth very, very important, and creating competition within the squad. For example, you look at I suppose the way the squad have moved on from injury to the loose head at
Andrew Porter.
Jeez, how could I ever forget that? What a player. Andrew Porter, who for me is just so valuable to any team. He's playing great rugby, but it was just 40 minutes kind of, that's dealt with. We're on, it's an opportunity for someone else. But, they have, I suppose, genuine competition in so many places that's what you're looking for. And once you've established that, it makes it very competitive, but it's still, dependent on Johnny being in form, because if you take that out, it's Carberry on form, which is like, it's not the same team. It's like, for me, I think, and yeah, Eddie Jones gets a rap from certain people, but I think his preparation for World Cups is fascinating, and the fact that he's so well taught through of what he wants to achieve at World Cup time, and that's, he goes, okay, judge me on that. And I think he's won one, I think, and been in 3 other finals. So I think he knows what he's doing. And for him, this weekend, he's going to see no Farrell, no Tuolagi, and 2 of the Vunipolas missing. And I think he's interested to see where his team is, knowing that when he has them, England could potentially be 30-35% better.
Yeah.
Because they're big pieces of anyone's jigsaw with the size of the 2 men.
The English media are like saying, "Oh, it's 2 games to save his job." I'm like, that makes no sense. He's in the middle of like churning through all these players and going, "Yeah, you can be part of my team. You can't be. You haven't shown up. You're not good enough." Like that's obviously they haven't won the Six Nations.
And
it's unlikely they will.
And but it's after the first game, it was kind of like, okay,
yeah, let's build for the World Cup.
Yeah, but I think there's so many people, I suppose, that are. If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. But he's kind of plucked Anthony Seaball, is it? The Brisbane Broncos coach, who had a horrible season as the general manager in NRL and was on the floor, and now he's in as his defence coach in England, because I think he understands that maybe I can get 1, 2, 3% of just probably alternative thinking from this guy. Because he understands they have limited time to probably get the ideas across, but it's probably maybe his value is in meetings and in kind of, for me, the NRL is 6 months ahead of rugby union. So everything you see in terms of
it's be kind of annoying, is it? Oh, look at those guys.
Yeah, but you see now, you watch that. It's a fantastic competition, but you watch the phase plays that happen in union. Most of those ideas are plucked from the NRL. And these kind of playing out the back and the pods and stuff. Because obviously it's so much easier to set it up and create in rugby league because there's no ruck.
Yeah.
So you just get a line against a line attack. So you kind of have to be smart in how you structure your defence and attack, and they have good skill levels. But there's so many, I suppose, subplots for the weekend.
Living in France, do you have a different sense of the French media? Are you reading everything, or is it okay to ignore it? Because this is in the context, Paris Saint-Germain beaten last night from a very winnable position, 2-0 up against Real Madrid, and they lose 3-2. You were probably travelling and didn't see the game, but the L'Équipe player ratings are fairly typical L'Équipe. So it's a 2 for Donnarumma, 3 for Kimpembe, 2 for Marquinhos. After that, things get a bit better, apart from Neymar, who gets a 4, and Hakimi, who gets a 4. There's 5, 7 for Mbappe and Verratti, 6 for Messi.
Jeez, I was expecting to be a lot lower considering the French media. No, I think
these are generous for L'Équipe, aren't they?
Yeah, especially, I suppose, considering it's not the first time we've been here with Paris Saint-Germain.
No.
And they're hugely disappointed, obviously. Yeah, there's massive interest in that game last night. Incredible in the fact that, but I think, there's something missing there, obviously.
Is there any chance that the rugby team could end up being as flaky as Paris Saint-Germain? And that would be great for the rest of the world, wouldn't it?
I don't think so, though. There seems, for the first time, not the first time, but in a long time, there feels like there's a very solid base to the French rugby network group, team, management. They are very united, it seems, and that's not just the first 30. That seems to be what they have there, is that they want all the players that are club players now want to play for France, which wasn't the case. It was before. It was earn a good living. And if I get to play for France, it's a bonus.
Yeah. Are the French rugby media the same as L'Équipe, or the player ratings tend to be 2s and 3s at weekends?
I haven't seen many of the ratings. I think what's good over there is the fact that they write the question, and then exactly as the player or coach says.
Okay, yeah.
So it's very much in context.
Yeah, because I read somewhere in the papers today, it was a question about something is being ridiculous And Eddie Howe answered the question, but was he actually asked, was it ridiculous, or was that the view of the person? Whereas actually, if you see the question, there's an opportunity for you to make your mind up.
It's very, very different.
Yeah.
And it's very, very accurate. And
so you can't complain if you say something stupid, basically.
It's there in black and white.
That's on me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's no, but there's huge interest in the rugby team as well. So now with that, there'll be negative day or two around Paris Saint-Germain, but there'll be it's tomorrow night, the big game in Cardiff, and they've had I think a lot of illness in camp this week. They've 2 COVID cases, but I think there's a lot of flu in France.
Right,
seems to be swirling around, and I think Aldred was off early in the week. Fiku was off, so I mean, I think they'll be too powerful and too good for Wales, I think. But you still want to be making sure you're near 100% for that game.
Give us your prediction for the England game.
It's a game, I think, that all of a sudden from the outside you're looking at that Ireland are favourites, and I think that's very, very dangerous in the fact that England at Twickenham are very different. They're very usually very, very good in Twickenham. It's I think Ireland need to be on top of their game to come away with a victory. But there's no reason why they can't be. There seems to be, I suppose, since the French game, you watched that again, Ireland were inaccurate in certain areas, left opportunities out there, didn't probably put France under the pressure that they needed, especially in the first 40, then kind of played their game and were good. Tadhg Furlong, I think, is exceptional what he can bring to a team, not in a scrum or in close quarters. His capacity to be able to kind of release backs with the timing of a pass is exquisite, and very few players, backs included, can do what he can do. So it makes for, a 50-50 game for me, Ger. I think Ireland are probably more confident. England are very much in the unknown. I think that's probably, if you're Marcus Smith, I think that's probably an advantage for him. He'll just play. For me, he looks ready to have a massive impact on the world stage, and makes it very exciting. Looking at the English team, it's for the first time, I think, in a long time, I don't have very good knowledge of the individual players in their team, so I'm still kind of trying to understand who's going to play and why is he the winger, why is he 15 and why is he 9. But it's a fascinating game, but I think for me it's very, very difficult to call.
Yeah, okay, all right, great to have you with us.
Cheers.
Around about this time last year, you were going shopping around in the Munster for an out half. Is there anything that you want to tell us? Any of those recruitment bits you want to just...
No, he turned me down, so no, there's at this stage, what are we? It's business done.
Anything you want to tell us about that hasn't broken yet?
No.
Okay. Ronan O'Gara, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be back talking the Champions League next.